Thank the Admiral. Mr. Coffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, General Mattis, I first want to commend you in taking a look at going beyond this 20-year career path and looking at a longer career path. Having served as an infantry officer too, only having 1 year as a rifle platoon commander, my first assignment, I mean, I think that we need to look at individuals being able to spend more time at different levels in their career path, and I think we're pushing people through faster than we ought to. But one question, first a statement that I disagree with using nation building as a principal tool for achieving our foreign policy objectives, but I understand that's beyond the pay grade or beyond the Department of Defense to make that decision. But one question I have of you is, number one, has using our conventional forces in a heavy footprint for counterinsurgency purposes, how has that degraded our warfighting capability from a conventional standpoint? And prospectively, are there plans to rely more heavily on special operations forces to counter irregular threats, asymmetric threats, and utilize our conventional forces to counter conventional threats going forward? Could you address that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Coffman. On using our SOF more, we are using them right now to the absolute limit of capacity in a number of areas, not just the ones that make the newspapers every day. So between General Casey, General Conway, Admiral Olson, who commands Special Operations Command, between the Army, Army, Marine Corps, SOF, and Joint Forces Command, we are looking at those engagement efforts, counterinsurgent efforts that require SOF only, where we're building relationships and this sort of thing. If it's just teaching troops how to fight small unit tactics, how to march, how to shoot, how to do first aid, those are things the general purpose force can take off of the special forces, so they're free to do only the things that they're best attuned for. So there is going to continue to be a need for our general purpose forces to be able to fight across the spectrum of combat. We cannot have forces that we basically put on the shelf, say we only use them in this kind of a fight. We try to bring all of them together, and I recognize there is some degradation right now, but we believe that with the congressional buildup of the Army and the Marines that they have funded, and with the drawdown of about 10,000 fewer troops in the CENTCOM AOR September of this year compared to September of a year ago, you'll see dwell times extending, and that will allow the Chief of Staff of the Army coming out of the Marine Corps to get back to some of the more conventional aspects of war, which we have put on the back burner right now. We have Marines who have not been on board ship, although they've been in the Marine Corps for 8 years. We have Army troops who've not coordinated large artillery fires in support of brigade maneuver. Dwell time will give us the chance to do that, sir, without segregating the general purpose force out of the irregular warfare.
Thank you, General Mattis. Admiral, I think you have 4 brigade combat teams organic to NATO or in position in Europe, but my first assignment was in the United States Army Mechanized Infantry in Europe, and we did reforger exercises every year. I don't know if those are still ongoing, where forces from CONUS or the United States would then go to Europe, and we would kind of simulate being able to utilize them for a counterattack against, at that time, Warsaw Pact forces. Since we have that capability, and can't we pre-position those forces within the United States without compromising our commitment to NATO, and simply utilize those forces on an ongoing operational basis by deploying them into Europe on a very temporary basis, and then pulling them back, but basing them inside the United States?
You could examine a construct like that, and I recognize that any decision like this has political and economic elements that need to be worked out. There's a business case that's involved with all this, and I would refer that aspect of it to the Department of the Army, which looks very closely at all this. My job is to provide my military advice as to what I think is best for the security and defense of the United States and Europe. And I've looked at this very closely. And from my perspective, because of the things we talked about earlier, the reassurance, deterrence, leadership, logistics, training, I think 4 brigade combat teams in Europe is a good investment for the United States, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.